Well, good evening, folks. Hope you're well. Friday. Yeah, man. God, don't you just love them? Well, it's another day closer to Monday. That's one way of looking at it. So I hope you're well. Bit of a casual video this evening, more of a chatterbox as you do your ironing or whatever you choose to do on a Friday night. So, you can listen, you don't have to watch me, you can listen to me as a podcast or whatever you want to do. I don't do the visuals. Thought about it a few times and I get arrested. Anyway, so a couple of things. For those of you who don't know, the French people, they like eating frog's legs. When I say eating frog's legs, they just like eating the top muscles of the leg of the frog, which is quite, well, they're famous for eating anything. I mean, French men, French people stick almost anything in their mouths, don't they? I mean, come on, a nation that eats snails and frogs. Really? Ugh. Anyway, I have to have sympathy for the frog because, there's a lot of them walking around on crutches. But it is disaster. I mean, I feel sorry for the little fellas because I happen to like frogs. And you often wonder, how do they end up cooking them? Well, they actually boil them. But the way you boil them is quite important, really. It's not complicated, You get a pot of water, but the last thing you do is heat up the water. You don't want to do that because if you chuck the frog in to the warm water, it'll hop straight out. It'll think, sod this. And, these slippy little suckers, you've got to get hold of them. But inevitably, they cook the frog live, which is terribly cruel. But what they do is they chuck the frogs into a pot of cold water. And they gradually heat up the water, and the frog actually gets to a stage of perfect heat. It loves it, and then suddenly it falls asleep. It becomes technically deoxygenated. It actually dies. It falls asleep and dies and gets cooked. And that's one subtle way of cooking frogs. So this is how you cook frogs. When I was a youngster, I remember going to Scotland with my parents to see my mother's parents, and I was very young. I was about 5 or 6 years old. I remember these times. I can remember things that happened way back in my life, but I can't remember barely what happened yesterday. Anyway, there I was in Scotland, bloody freezing in St Andrews of all places, on the harbour in Crail, where my grandfather used to have a lobster boat, a boat that used to go out catching crabs and lobsters. And I was very well versed, really, in the technique of catching lobsters by the time I'd finished my little jaunts up and down Scotland. But a couple of things I want to relate to you, because I'm going to use those little stories in a minute to tell you something. But I need to get the groundwork done. So please put on your listening ears. I remember once I went into the boat and I didn't have my sea legs. I was too young. And we went off, and my grandfather had thrown out all these what they call lobster pots, the lobster traps. Where he's thrown old fish heads and dead fish in these things as bait for the lobsters. And I like lobsters. Lobsters are rather strange creatures. They're the most, well, they got the biggest history of any living species on the planet. Quite frankly, their genetics goes back. One thing you have to realise about lobsters is that they are well, if they get into a fight because they're very territorial, and one loses a fight, the lobster, becomes very depressed, strangely enough. A little bit like ourselves. They actually do suffer from depression. The other strange thing about lobsters, of course, is that they piss out of their mouths. Yes, not taking the piss, they're giving it out of their mouths. It's rather a strange way of urinating, but there we are, that's lobsters for you. But they're incredible creatures and very intelligent. And as I say, they do suffer from this business about going into a state of depression, because there is a hierarchical structure within the fraternity of lobster gangs. They gang around in 3s and 4s, and they take battle for territory. But I thought I'd just throw that in. So I have a fascination for lobsters and things, and they use lobsters for experiments, for making pharmaceuticals that are designed to control human depression. So they experiment with depression relieving drugs on lobsters. They cause them to fight. One loses, they grab him, he's depressed. It's usually the males that fight often, and isn't that the case always? And they feed it a test pharmaceutical to see if it cheers up, because if they're depressed they won't fight. Hey ho. And so those people in our society that suffer from depression can thank the lobster for a lot of research has gone into their serotonin research, which is responsible, this hormone, for making us a happy Hector again, because depressed people have a very low level of serotonin naturally occurring in their body. If we all lacked serotonin, we'd all be depressed. Well, you know, that's the state of play. So, thanks to the lobsters. Anyway, we go on this boat then with my grandfather, and we've got a big stick with a long pole with a hook on it, pulling in the rope, which is and there's a float that you pull in, and you know the lobster's going to be in the cage that's been caught. But you can equally do this with crabs, the same. Although crabs don't suffer from depression when they lose a fight. Rather strange that. Never mind. So on this occasion we actually did go crab hunting. And when we got the crabs out, I was very excited, but the first thing you have to do is put rubber bands around their clappers, because they can really hurt. And you really don't want to get clamped by a crab. And then you chuck them in a bucket. As a child, I was just watching, you'll understand, at that age, and it was hard work and it was very cold. And first crab goes in, then another crab goes in, and another crab goes in. I think, well, this is all right. And I said to my grandfather, why, aren't they good? Look, Grandad, they're escaping. One's just about to get out over the lip of the bucket. And he said, carry on watching, laddie. And I did. And just as I was watching the crab just about to get out, the crab underneath grabbed it and pulled it back in. And there was a big tumble around in the bucket again, as they wrestled for pole position. And again the crab tried to get out, a new crab. And guess what? The same thing happened again and again and again. They pull each other up, back in. And this really demonstrates exactly how human society is, to me. As one person tries to get out the shit, another one doesn't like it and pulls you back in, because misery loves company. And there are so many people out there that are acting precisely like those crabs in a bucket. And you will never lose a crab out of a bucket if you've got 2+ crabs in a bucket, because they'll pull the aspiring crab back into the crap with the rest of them. So that was a lesson learnt. And the third lesson and final one I'm going to jabber on about, how nature teaches us things that we can relate to, is that I was watching my grandmother, my mother's mother, cook. And on this particular day we were doing biscuits, and I like biscuits. I could polish off a whole packet of digestives in a heartbeat. I just have 2 cups of tea, one for dunking, which is gradually goes away as the more I dunk, and the one for drinking. Such is my lot in life. It's my obsession. Anyway, we got the baking tray out the oven, and I was busy cutting out the shape of the biscuits with a template and laying them on. And oh God, I couldn't wait. These ones were ginger biscuits, I remember. And I was my job to slide the tray into the oven as my nana closed the cupboard of the oven and set the temperature. And she said, no, don't, look and watch if you like and get warm, but do not open the oven. Concerned over my welfare, of course. I was young. Well, I was hungry. And Nana had gone to do bits around the house, and I was busy in and out checking the status of my biscuits. You'll notice, my biscuits. Not done yet. Kept on coming back every 10 or 15 minutes. Not done yet. And I thought, they smelled terrific. And I was looking around to see where Nana was. And I thought, dear, I'm just going to have a peek to see if they're nearly done, a poke, And I opened the oven door with a blast of warm air in my face. And I was poking around in the oven to see how hard the biscuit mixture was. Are they ready yet? Well, they weren't, so I closed it up again. Thought, she'll never know. Well, sure enough, as the time came, she came back, and I was salivating. I couldn't wait. She opened the oven and pulled a tray of biscuits out, and she slapped them on the side, and she shut the oven off, and she's a bit scratching her head and thinking, something is not right, laddie. Oh, really? Why? She says they look like they've been caught in the squat. Now, I thought this was Scottish, that I didn't quite grasp. I said, well, I don't know what you mean, Nana. She said, well, they're supposed to rise a lot higher than they did, but they've started to rise, and they failed to get out of the squat, they're standing up. Well, they're not. They're stuck in the squat. They've been caught in the squat. And that's how they stayed. Oh, why did that do that? And she said, well, it's usually due to a temperature drop in the oven. You didn't open the oven, did you, John? No. I thought, thank Christ I'm not Pinocchio. I'd have taken her eye out. No, absolutely not. I promise. Oh, she knew. I couldn't wait. I was so impetuous and impatient. But hey-ho, being caught in the squat. I thought, what a great little statement that is. And I never forgot it. And I often hear my mother and her mother laughing about it in future years. And I'll never forget that phrase, caught in the squat. So my little trip to Scotland was quite educational. apart from knowing and learning it was bloody freezing, not a place I choose to live, quite frankly. So, how many people do you know in life have been caught in the squat? Well, most of us have. Because we all seem to develop reasonably quickly from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, then to 12 and 13, and then we stop, don't we? The big growth spurts slow right down, but equally, somebody opens our oven. In that sense, metaphorically, I mean somebody has to give us a job. And the whole temperature of this wonderful experience called life drops. And most of us are walking around like biscuits that have been caught in the squat. We don't realise our full potential. That's the point. Because life has a way of keeping us right under the thumb. And this is why 95% plus of us will go to our graves with our song still in us and never quite achieving what we truly could if we were allowed to. Not that we're not capable, but if we're allowed to, we never quite achieve what we should be able to achieve. It's only for the 1%ers, isn't it? And when you suddenly realise this, it does make you feel like a lobster who's lost a fight. It does depress you to realise very, very quickly that no matter your education, no matter what your income is, you're going to be working for the man, as Johnny Cash used to sing. And that is our lot in life. If you're lucky, you'd have to get a work. I mean, I think it's the... I don't think we are the lucky ones, those in jobs. I really don't, sometimes. But we are like crabs in a bucket. The moment we try to improve our station, you can guarantee a close relative of yours is going to not really want to see you excel at anything, and they're going to want to pull you back in the bucket with them. And that happens time and time again. It can happen with siblings, and it can happen with parents. Some parents don't like seeing their children high achieve. It's rather strange, isn't it? It's almost like infanticide, mental infanticide. They wreck the children, because their domestic troubles and squabbles between husband and wife often affect the children. And you get many times where the woman doesn't want the children to leave home and suffer empty nest syndrome herself. And some men, of course. But it's the matriarch, isn't it? The matriarch syndrome. Head of the household, she wants her little nest of babies around the dinner table and shut the door away from the big bad world. And mums need to be needed. And so do dads. If you're fortunate enough to have children, you'll understand that one. But eventually your children start to fly the nest, and it's a real empty feeling, which I'm going through right now. Because both of my children now have, well, left home. My son rather recently. And I miss him. I miss him like my arms. I miss his conversation. And I often find myself about to say something and go and ask when I realise he's not there to ask. And it is quite tough. I'm reaching for my serotonin tablets as we speak, maybe. Not yet. But it does visit regularly, thank goodness. And gives me a top-up. But if you look at general society, you know, life is bloody hard, isn't it? And I don't think it should ever be like this. Well, no, of course not. It's not designed to be like it is by the Creator, whoever or whatever you think it is. Life should never be a struggle. It's our fault it's a struggle. Well, it's not entirely our fault. It's those who run the show's fault that our lives is a struggle, because we have this thing called money. That's the dilemma. But rather strange thing about money, the more you have, the more you want. Oh, how true. It's an insatiable desire, as so many 1%ers will recognise. But most of us don't really achieve our true potential because we give up too soon. And if there's advice I gave my children is never stop trying. When you're trying something, there's no point in trying. You either do it or you don't. But to try, you're almost half admitting defeat. You're giving yourself a bolt hole. There is no try. You either do it or you don't. And you will continue trying to achieve it until you've completed it and achieved it. You only start to try things when you're prepared, really, mentally, to accept defeat. Otherwise, there should be no such word in our vocabulary. Well, I'll do it. That's better. Not, I'll try it. No. You will do it. Huge difference. But people often say, well, I'll give it a try. No, you won't. You're going to do it. That's the decision made. That's all. But why so many of us, 95% plus of us, never quite reach our true potential is this. The best analogy I can give you would be that you might recall, certainly not too distant future, every town and village didn't have tap water or taps in their houses. And even as nearby as the Victorian times, quite frankly. And but they did have a communal hand crank pump, which was tapped into the water well below, or the water supply, which is a stream going by so. And you used to stand there, hook your bucket on and pump like crazy, and nothing happens, nothing. You're pumping away. Hello, David, how are you? Oh, I'm all right, thanks. Yeah. Kids all right? Yeah, got to get some more shoes and yada, yada, yada. And have you seen the king lately? Or you know what I mean? The whole conversation, you're still pumping. Nothing going out. Okay, nothing. And then all of a sudden it starts to trickle, and she'd go, yeah, oh look, the water's coming up, great. And she gets a bucket ready, and it gets faster and faster, and more water gushes out every time she pumps up and down. Okay. But the problem is if she stops pumping, because it's not airtight, the water will sink back down to where it came from, and she'll have to start pumping all over again. So they're very reluctant to keep to stop. They've got to keep going. And when somebody wants to hook on their bucket, they'll take over. So to save themselves the trouble of having to prime the pump. That's what it is. It's pumping on nothing. It's priming the pump. So it's always best to be the second user of the communal and water supply than the first, because let others do the priming. And that's what the 1%ers do in life, folks. They let us do the priming. We're the idiots who are pumping on dry pumps and getting things prepared. And this is what we do in our lives. Many of us are continually starting something and then we quit. We start something else, 99% complete, and then we quit. And it's like the pump. The water's coming up and then it goes back down. Water comes up and goes back down. And it's the same with money. Crank, pay the bills, crank, and and the money's going up, it's going down, it's going up, it never quite reaches the point where it's gushing. Is it? Not really. Because sometimes we lose our jobs and the whole thing goes down again. We end up getting into debt again, or we have an unexpected few bills coming in and we're ill or whatever. And the money goes back down the tube. Then you get a new job because you get better. Pump again to pay off all those debts you accumulated while you didn't have an income, or you're on benefits, or whatever your problems were. And there's nobody immune from these problems, of course. But this is why we never get wealthy. Because it's this hand cranking, working just enough to pay the bills. That's what we got. We paid just above the revolution level, folks. That's what it all amounts to, these little life lessons that we all seem to learn. And, you know, you look around at what's going on. And I know, and you know, that there are a group of people who are very schadenfreudig about this. They take great pleasure in watching the general public pump away for nothing, so to speak. Because that's why we live in a box, we'll watch a box, we'll die, we'll get put in a box and we'll go in a hole in the ground in our box. And that's our lot in life. And I'm sorry to be sounding so depressed, but it's a reality for us all, 95% of us. We're never going to reach our true potential because the system is geared towards against us, quite frankly. We've all been caught in the squat. And many are like those crabs in a bucket. Your friends and close family maybe don't want you to succeed because that means you'll be leaving home to a bigger house or drive a faster car. They really don't want that. They want you in misery. Misery loves company. They want you in the bucket just with them. I've got some relatives like that. I haven't seen them in years and they're still in the shit. Nothing will change for them. Well, it's not my fault that they're in the shit. I've been in the shit a few times in my life and got myself out. And I'm sure you might have done that too. But you do learn who your friends are, don't you? Sometimes your friends take over the hand cranking while you recover. Friend indeed. But when you stand back and look at the situation in our world now, it's slowly dawning on me. And I really shouldn't say that because that's almost what it's almost a logo of what I want to tell you, really. Is that, you know, I watched a video the other day about this. I thought I must do a video about that because just to get it over to the folk, all 45, 46 subscribers of them. And many more, hopefully, one day. I'm still cranking my handle on my YouTube channel. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I ain't giving up. While I have breath still in me and electric to supply my Mac. I've cranked my handle so often, keeping it a family show, that I'm waiting for the gush. See what I mean? But what do I mean by that then? The rising, it's not the rising of the tide, folks, that worries me. It's the rising of the morning sun. That's the logo that you practically see on every bit of political slogans and propaganda. A new dawn. It's a new world order. It's a new dawn. A new day. It's all a new dawn or a new day, which would a new dawn is a new day. But these little things, you see, you have to be on the listen. You have to actively listen to the speeches that politicians and world leaders make. And you might think it's quite innocuous. And it's a new day, and that would imply that there's a change in the wind. And Obama uses this, or didn't he? I stand for change. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all the politicians in America, no matter what their political leaning, they all have this common thread between everything they say. Because they're not opposites, folks, politicians, they're opposames. And David Icke says that word, I quite like it. They're opposames. They appear opposite to the plebs, but deep down behind closed doors, they've all got the same agenda. And their enemies are not our enemies, and vice versa. Their enemies, they pass off to us as being communists and Marxists and, socialism. And, oh yes, we've got to fight this. But they let themselves down and they let the secret out the bag. Democrats and Republicans. I mean, why have they only got two choices? Because ultimately Democrats and Republicans are the same, just different poles of an extreme. But they're both communists. One's communist, the other's fascism. Same. It's very straightforward. You know, you got the Liberals and the Democrats, the Republicans. You know, in America, in our country, we just got more choice of the same shit. Because in our country, folks, as much as the rest of the world, the common underlying theme of the big New World Order, even Brown said it, the alleged, not for long, was he, a Prime Minister? And Tony Blair talks about New World Order, Bush has talked about New World Orders. It's a new world, it's a new dawn a-coming. It's a star coming, you know, the sun coming up over the mountaintop, you know. It's all about communism and centralized control of the world's population. One world army. Well, we're another stepping stone, stepping closer, aren't we, with the recently discussed European army. Oh, that's just a stepping stone to the world army. United Nations is practically the world army. But hey-ho, they're still talking about this. Even though we're supposedly Brexiting, which is on very thin ice, I think, the Brexit deal at the moment. I still think that they're going to stall it and stall it and stall it. And people get bored with it now. And for me, personally, it doesn't make a great deal of difference whether we Brexit or not. I'm not that important, and I don't have much to deal with in Europe anyway, thank you. My investment portfolio is not that important. What happens in Europe should stay in Europe. And certainly Britain should be out of Europe. But it doesn't matter, because the telltale signs the world over is that there isn't a country on this earth, the flat one, that isn't polluted by this statement, New World Order, dawning of a new day, change is going to come. Oh, for sure. Inch by inch, we're going metric. You have to think about that one. It's the hand crankers out there, the politicians and the 1%ers that are experts at hand cranking. It's like a dog with a bone. They won't ever, ever, ever give up. They've been at it for thousands of years. And the overall agenda, folks, not that it'll come as a surprise for you, is that they want a few to control and own the wealth of the money of the many. It's simples. And I call the 1%ers the hand crankers. But very often they want us to crank. And only when the money starts gushing and there's benefits to them will they make an appearance. And then slaughter the rest of us down to a manageable 500 million. Which means that in order to slaughter the world down to 500 million, they're going to have to kill 3 out of 4 of us. So do you know 3 people you don't like? You can name them. They've even told us on the Georgia Guidestones. But look at all the logos, as Michael Tsarian said. Look at the logos. And if only we understood that we're a tiny dimension away from another dimension. And very often I used to think, well, logos, they're just a picture. No, they're not. They're actually spells that we don't quite understand, but they work, you know. Otherwise, companies out there wouldn't protect their logos, would they? I'm not going to go through the series of logos, but you know what a logo is. And that basically, it's a spell for the black magicians. And this is why they're anal about protecting their particular logo. It's there to It's their access to other dimensions as a logo, believe it or not. But this is the stupidity of having tattoos. Now, just no disrespect if you have tattoos, good for you. But if you mark your body with a set, I don't know, God knows what you want to put a tattoo on yourself, that is acting as a gateway, invitation to the spirits that surround you, good and bad. And there'll be bad ones coming to you. I don't understand why, I really don't. I fail to grasp why people would want to scar themselves with tattoos. Because they're all to do with satanic ritual. They've all got their own little meanings and importances. And I'm not talking mum and dad. I'm talking about pictures of certain objects and certain designs that have been handed through generation after generation. And you'll notice, folks, that the elites, the 1%ers and the high rankers in our society, very few, if any, have got a tattoo. Well, there we are. It shows control. They own you on a spiritual level. And this is the first thing they did with the people in Auschwitz and the other concentration camps. It wasn't just the Jews who got tattooed, by the way. It was every one of them going into those places, those evil, horrible places throughout the world. They weren't just in Germany, they're in Poland and other places. But then if you read the Gulag Archipelago from Solzhenitsyn, which I think, there we are, great book. My son started to read it and you can see how far he's got. There. I've read it. You cannot believe the depravity and the potential of what one human being can do to another until you've read that book. That's the abridged version. There's a cut down version, okay, by Jordan Peterson, who actually worked with on the Gulag Archipelago. It's about life of a political prisoner called Alexander Solzhenitsyn, where in Russia they don't have to have a reason just to say you're under arrest, because they can accuse you. The accusation is enough to put you in prison. So they can make accusations up. We heard that you said this about our leader, and you can deny as much as you like, but two big burly men are going to bung you in the back of a lorry and beat the crap out of you and take all your possessions off you, smash your house, smash your family up, and you're going off to the Gulag. Gulag is simply a prison, and an archipelago is a collection of islands. Okay. And many, many islands in bloody Russia, really the coldest part of Russia, were on the archipelago, where we used to imprison people and make them stand out there naked in the freezing cold for a whole day in their bare feet. And women, by the way. And just have them there, stood there. They used to beat them. And this is not because they've been proven guilty, they've been thought of as guilty. They then in Russia have thought police. But it is a way of the eugenics program for Russia that Stalin was and all the other cronies were at. That's why Stalin slaughtered millions of his own people. He didn't need an excuse to round them up and send them off to the gulags. Such wonderful things, and this is what breaks my heart when I see youngsters in America going down the streets from the Communist Party supporting Communist China and Communist Russia. It doesn't matter how you dress it up, folks. Collective communism, where everybody has the same as everybody else, but some people have more than others. Isn't that the case? So much for communism. And that's where the world is going. It's a 3-step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, no steps back, 2 steps forward. Oh, they haven't noticed, we'll take another step forward. And this is what we're subjected to on a daily basis. And I'm surrounded, like you, with crabs. In the sense that the moment you start to react and think, hang on, you like a deer in the headlights, you suddenly realise that the game is up and you've been rumbled and that you know what's going on. Somebody could accuse you of something and be taken away and put in prison. Even if it was right or wrong, it doesn't matter to them. They've got you off the street. They've now locked you away and you're a slave. Because the one thing is that these people are zero tolerant. And yet you get the children and the youngsters. Yeah, you know, the political parties, Labour Party, and the bloody idiot in America, Bernie Sanders, commie. And you want to send him to the Gulag archipelagos and see if Bernie has such a wonderful thought about communism then. Well, Clinton, Bernie, Trump, they're all communists. They're all Reds under the beds, folks. They're all working with Russia and China and the other commie countries because communism is the way this world is going to be run. We're all caught in the squat. It's very simple, and we are certainly like those crabs in a bucket. And lots of these people, like Solzhenitsyn, were put in prison on the rumour that they made a comment, just one comment, enough for them to give them an excuse to get you, throw you in a truck, strip you bare naked and starve you and beat you and shove you into the gulags. Well, America, the United States of America, the FEMA camps have yet to be shown in their true light, haven't they? There's 4 FEMA camps, from my understanding, per state in America, and there's 50 states in America. There you go, do the maths. And the strange thing is about these FEMA camps is that the barbed wire posts supporting the barbed wire face inwards, not outwards to keep out, but in to keep in. And they've got playgrounds. For what? For your children. And the other thing about the FEMA camps is, of course, there's large storage aircraft hangars full of hundreds of thousands of black plastic, huge coffins that will take a family of 4 in one go. Obama, and this has been absolutely proven, Obama ordered 300 guillotines. Where are they? Because there are certain people, whistleblowers in America, that were dealing with air freight, knew exactly what they were, and they disappeared like a fart in the wind, as well as the guillotines disappeared. What are they going to be used for? Well, use your imagination. It's going to dispose of those people who simply don't comply. Beheading, it seems, is the most humane way of disposing and dispatching a human being. So these FEMA coffins, FEMA camp coffins, will certainly take 4 at a go. Oh, for sure. And you can watch. Just type in FEMA camp and black coffins, black plastic coffins, and you can watch videos that would make your toes curl. Even Jesse Ventura, if that's his name, did a complete documentary about them. And he's had his eyes widened and opened. So you have a choice. Comply or be quiet and walk quietly and carry a big stick. But sometimes, like I say, ignorance is bliss, and sometimes I wish I didn't know half the stuff I knew, because it puts me in a state of depression to know that it's not for so much me having a pity party. It's I have sympathy for my children and my grandchildren that may be coming unborn. Because this world, this new world order, is here, and it's just maturing, that's all. And it's just getting rather like an immature apple caught in the squat. It hasn't quite reached maturity yet. But don't think for 1 second there isn't a politician in this world that is pro-democratic. They're not. All politicians want centralized dictatorship, of course with them in control over the masses, us useless eaters, so we've been called. Well, that's enough. But do check out the Gulag Archipelago. And this is a great deal, this book. You will not want to put it down. Don't read it at bedtime, you will not get some sleep. Edited by vintage Solzhenitsyn, of course, but with Jordan Peterson. And it's a terrific book. It's totally factual. It's got a few pictures in there for you. In fact, if I can find a few, not sure if you can see them. There we are. There's lots in. It's a heartbreak to see what one man like Solzhenitsyn had to go through. And he had to hide it in several places before the manuscripts were found. Because if they're ever found, but he wanted the story to get out. But this is what's coming our way. And that's what Solzhenitsyn and Jordan Peterson are both saying. For Christ's sake, wake up and smell the coffee. Love you all. Take care. Catch you tomorrow, folks. Been a long old day, but it is Friday. Do you remember Cracker Jack?